Shavua Tov, I don't like to talk politics, but something is going on which may shed light or help us to understand better one of the most important mitzvot that we have. Every mitzvah is, of course, important, but one of the central ones, as the rabbis say, that are the main thing, and everything else is commentary, ve'ahavta l'reacha kamocha, to love your fellow Jew. Second of all, understanding something about this political controversy may also help us to understand why Moshe was chosen to be the leader of the Jewish people, and what very important lesson we can learn from Moshe. I refer, of course, to the fact that two leaders of opposite parties, have been found to more or less have committed the same transgression. That, of course, is not the main thing that I wish to discuss, but rather it's how this controversy has turned commentators on both sides into great Talmudic scholars to explain to us exactly why when our guy did it, it's not so bad, but when their guy did it, goodness gracious, he should go to jail, if not worse. The psychology here is very important to understand. But let's take a look at Moshe. It is surprising that Moshe was chosen to be the leader of the Jewish people. For example, first of all, the rabbis teach us that in the merit of three things, the Israelites deserve to be redeemed. Number one, they didn't change their names. Number two, they didn't change their dress. And number three, they didn't change their language. In other words, even though they may have assimilated in the idolatrous practices of Egypt, they may have sunk to the 49th level of tumah, of impurity, in terms of their behavior, but they still were distinguishable as a unique people with unique names, with a unique mode of dress, whether it be referring to modesty or simply fashion, and with a unique language. So therefore it is even more surprising that their leader fulfilled none of these requirements. His name, Moshe, is an Egyptian name. It's given to him by Batya, or Bitya, the daughter of Pharaoh. When she finds him floating in a little basket on the river, she calls him Moshe, ki min hamayim meshitihu, for I have drawn him forth out of the water. Now it could be that this also means the same thing in Hebrew, which is true, so therefore it's not so bad, but nonetheless it seems like he has an Egyptian name. He's growing up in the palace of the Pharaoh, so he certainly is dressing and talking Egyptian, so much so that when he has to flee and goes to Midian, the daughters of Yitro, who find him at the well where he rescues them from the shepherds, go home and tell their father that they saw an Ish Mitzri, an Egyptian man. So here you have Moses without the name, without the mode of dress, without the language, and yet he is the one to be the leader of the people. That's a curiosity. And the further curiosity is how Moses, when he is in Midian and he's at the burning bush and God is telling him to go and redeem the people of Israel, he doesn't jump to it. He comes back with a whole bunch of questions. Who am I? Am I worthy? Are they worthy? What's the name? And they won't believe me, and so forth and so on. I don't know, for heaven's sake. If my Rebbe would say to me, please go and do this, that, and the other thing, I'd jump and go do this, that, and the other thing. And when God himself tells Moshe, he's not jumping and doing, he's questioning, he's hesitating, he's resisting. How does that exactly work? Something even more surprising is the Ibn Ezra. The Ibn Ezra, who has in his commentary often surprising remarks which force you to think. So the Torah tells us that Moses, as he grew up in the palace of the king, he went out to see his brethren. Now Moses was aware of the fact that he was a Hebrew. His nursemaid was none other than his mother Yocheved. And it's clear all along that he knew what his lineage was. Excuse me. So we would expect that when it says that he goes out to see his brethren, we're referring to the Hebrews. And indeed, he sees an Egyptian hitting one of his fellow brethren, a Hebrew, and he kills the Egyptian, and so forth and so on. The Ibn Ezra says something very surprising. He says when Moses goes out to see his brethren, he's not referring to the Hebrews. He's referring to the Egyptians. Moses considers himself an Egyptian. He also considers himself a Hebrew, but he first and foremost considers himself an Egyptian because this is what he's known since day zero. He grew up in the palace of the king as Pharaoh's stepson, if you will, or step-grandson to be more precise. So he goes out as an Egyptian to see the Egyptians. What is that all about? What is going on with this Moses character? He argues with God when God tells him to go redeem the people. And he goes out from the palace to see the people as an Egyptian, and he talks Egyptian, he dresses Egyptian, and he has an Egyptian name, and yet this is the man who's going to be the leader of the Jewish people. What is going on here? By the way, parenthetically, there is a whole question about having names that are not Jewish names. Some rabbis were very opposed to it. There was a great rabbi from centuries ago called the Maharam Shik, and his last name was Shik. So how did he get that last name? He believed that you're not allowed to take a Gentile name. So when the authorities, this was I believe in Austria, made a rule that everybody had to have a family name, so he took the name Shik as a initials, Shem Yisrael Kodesh, which means an Israelite name is holy. Shin Yud Kuf Shik. That's how he got to that. Rav Moshe Feinstein, the contemporary great posek of the last century in America, was very lenient about having non-Jewish names, as long as it's not an overtly idolatrous name. We find in the Talmud even that there are people who have names from the secular world. For a whole year, the Jews named their babies Alexander in honor of Alexander the Great. So therefore you can't say that it is forbidden. Nonetheless, it's an interesting side point. Well, Moshe has an Egyptian name. And Moshe's Egyptian name means he was pulled out of the water. But Pharaoh's daughter says, Minamayim mishitihu, I extracted him from the water. The late great Rabbi Yehuda Amital from the Kfar Etzion, the Har Etzion Yeshiva, gave a very beautiful explanation of this. He says Moshe was taken out of the water, meaning he was not consisting of water. What does that mean? Water is the most malleable substance. It takes on the shape of whatever utensil it is in, whether it be in a cup or in a bowl, it will take on that shape. And that's the symbolism of assimilation. The person or the people who they take on the colors and the flavors and the shape of the society in which they live. And so the Israelites had assimilated to a large degree, even though they had maintained their outward framework. In terms of their moral and ethical behavior, they had become very indistinguishable from the Egyptians. They had sunk to the 49th level of impurity, so they had the attribute of water. But Moshe was taken out of the water. In other words, he was not water. He would maintain his independent structure. He'd maintain his values, his morals, his goals, his identity, no matter what other people would think, no matter who he identified with. And that's the key point here. Moses' journey was a journey to find truth, to find justice, to find where is the righteousness and where is the guilt. And so therefore he's checking out. He has no identity. He's checking out the Egyptians and the Hebrews. Who is right in this conflict? I myself, he might have said, identify as an Egyptian. I've grown up as Pharaoh's grandson in the palace. This is the only identity I know, but I do know that I have Hebrew lineage. But let me go see, are my people right? Are my people righteous? He goes out to see his brothers, says the Ibn Ezra, his Egyptian brothers, in order to judge them, to see how they are treating the Israelites. And what does he see? Something that disturbs him greatly. An Egyptian is hitting with brutal force and hatred an innocent Israelite. And Moshe says, this is wrong, and without hesitation. He looks here and there to make sure that he's not going to get in trouble. But without hesitation, he kills that Egyptian, because that is Moshe. Righteousness, tzedek, truth must prevail no matter who, whether it's our guy or the other guy. And the same thing happens at the burning bush. You see, God says to Moshe to go redeem the Israelites, but Moshe has seen the Israelites not at their best either. The very next day, he goes out and he sees two Israelites about to rain brutal blows on each other. They're having a fight. One of them has raised his hand to hit the other, and Moshe rebukes him, and that's the incident that lets him know that Pharaoh knows what he did to the Egyptian, and he's got to run away. So Moses knows that the Israelites have also become assimilated in terms of the idolatry of Egypt. So he has a very valid question to God. He says, God, even though it's you talking to me, even though you are sending me, and I believe in you, I don't have any imagination that I'm speaking to anyone other than the creator of the universe. Nonetheless, I need to feel the truth and the justiceness of this mission. Who am I to go to Pharaoh? Am I the right one? And in what zechut, v'chiotziat b'nei Yisrael, in what merit do the Israelites deserve to be redeemed? I need to understand who in this equation has righteousness on their side. So because right now the Israelites are not. So God answers him. And he says, when you take them out of Egypt, you will worship me on this mountain. In other words, here is where you will receive the Torah. And here I think that the burning bush itself may be the most eloquent answer to Moshe's question, because the bush symbolizes the nation of Israel, and it is in a dry, arid place where bushes should not really be able to survive, at least not easily. And not only that, it is engulfed in flames, which should make its survival even harder. This is a perfect parable to the Israelites in Egypt, where they are in a harsh, arid, as it were, spiritually arid environment, engulfed in flames, engulfed in servitude, being beaten and abused every single day, and yet it's still a bush. It still exists. They still are there with their names, with their dress, with their language. And what is it that gives them that ability to survive? Even though on the externals they may look no different than the Egyptians in terms of their behavior, something inside of them is very powerful. And that is, there must be some water in there, because a bush does not survive if it has no water at all. There must be some water in there. And water, the rabbis tell us, symbolizes Torah. Where is this discussion taking place? At Mount Sinai, the mountain where the Torah will be given. And God says, when they get here, that water inside of them will blossom forth, and the entire mountain, as we know, will bring grass and flowers and become very beautiful. In other words, Moshe, you only see the externals, but you should know that inside, the truth is that at this very moment they are worthy of redemption, despite their external behavior, because there is something inside them that is water, that is Torah, that keeps that bush alive. So we see that Moshe doesn't say, I'm on this team or I'm on that team. Apropos our discussion of the politics earlier, Moshe simply looks and says, who has righteousness on their side in this particular question of who deserves to be the prevailing here and winning here and being redeemed here, the Israelites or the Egyptians? The answer then becomes clear to him. And so I think that there's a very powerful lesson here about ve'ahavta l'reacha kamocha, to love our fellow Jew. We may think that it simply means I'm supposed to be nice. It's a good thing to love my fellow Jew, even if my fellow Jew is annoying, even if my fellow Jew is a miscreant, or it seems to me that they are so. The fact is that perhaps that is not even true. Perhaps I need to look at the fellow Jew as Moshe looked at Am Yisrael and looked at the burning bush and understood that, you know something? They may seem not to be on the level of spirituality, but there is something there that I can't see that is so powerful and so beautiful. So when we come to love our fellow Jew, we should do it with the understanding that that love is completely justified, that it is based on truth. Maybe we don't see that truth at the moment because it may be deeper inside, but each and every member of our people is something unique, is something special with tremendous spiritual power. Shavua Tov.